we need to talk about China, the coronavirus, and the Paris Agreement. Oh, and for the loonies over at the ABC and that bloke with the cat's bum mouth who does 15 minutes of telly a week for a couple of $100,000, just to be crystal clear, when I talk about China or the Chinese, I am talking about the totalitarian Communist Party of China and its dictator for life, Xi Jinping, not the long-suffering Chinese people. Do you understand there is a difference? It is not racist or xenophobic or whatever other adjectives you come up with to criticise the Chinese Communist government. Thank you. Now, last night on this show, it was great to see Peter Credlin chatting to the eminently sensible and extremely intelligent Liberal MP Andrew Hastie, and a bloke from the Labor Party who nobody's ever heard of before, who was also talking a great deal of common sense, which is probably why I've never heard of him before, because the Labor Party preferred to hide their best and their brightest in order to foist clowns like this on us.
Hey everyone, road trip to Canberra to make sure the government legislation's as good as it can be to help people. 660 kilometres to go. Bye.
I was just waiting for the squeal of brakes and come on, Bill, keep your eyes on the road. Or even worse, stand-up comedians like this bloke.
Will the Prime Minister restore funding so the ABC can keep doing its job so effectively?
Oh, right, OK, that's it, I get it. While people across Australia are out of work, on the scrap heap, having their salaries slashed, seeing their dreams and their retirement disappear before their eyes, Albo's main concern is for the nincompoops of the ABC to be given more of our rapidly disappearing money. Reality check, Albo. When we're up to $500 billion in debt in a year or so time, which there's every chance we will be, but hopefully not, we'll talk about that. Well, guess what? The first step in paying all that debt back will be to scrap the ABC, sell Ultimo, and that will at least leave us only $498.5 billion left to find. But I digress. Here's what Peter and Andrew and the sensible Labor guy nobody's ever heard of because he's so sensible were chatting about.
And also it means resilience. This pandemic has exposed, I think, vulnerabilities in our supply chain, which leaves us vulnerable to supply chain warfare. And so Anthony and I and others over the coming months will be thinking very carefully about some of the things that we need to do as a country to build our resilience.
And this is, of course, the point. We are not just going to have to reboot our economy, we are going to have to rebuild it to be resilient and prosperous and successful and productive enough that we no longer have to rely on China for all those crucial things. That we're going to have to do things by ourselves, you know, like manufacturing important medical supplies and a lot more. But there's a teeny problem. First, we're going to have to recalibrate a lot of our thinking and our priorities, and the time to do it is now. Back in 2016, on the day after Donald Trump's election, Malcolm Turnbull and Julie Bishop ratified the Paris Agreement, much to the delight of the lovies. The Paris Agreement is a madcap voluntary scheme whereby countries set their own emissions reductions targets and then agree to meet them. Places like Pakistan literally took the mickey and signed pieces of paper that said, "We will meet our targets when we meet them," or words to that effect. New Zealand said, "We'll reduce our emissions, except, in the agriculture and dairy industries," which is, of course, where most of their emissions come from, and so on and so on. You get the picture. But nobody took the mickey more so than China. China said, "We will carry on increasing our emissions until 2030, a decade from now, and then we will level off at whatever they are at that point." Sounds like a bit of an incentive there to massively increase your carbon footprint as fast and as long as you possibly can, which is, of course, precisely what China are doing. They are literally building or planning to build hundreds of coal-fired power plants to increase their industrial capacity. And here, dumb old Australia, led by Turnbull and Bishop at the time, committed us to reducing our emissions in all our key industries and agriculture and transport and traffic and everywhere else. In other words, the lifeblood of our nation. So, as we speak, China is busily ramping up its manufacturing and industrial capabilities. while we are busy shackling ours and suppressing them. China are busy making energy cheaper for themselves and more available, while we have deliberately made our energy the most expensive in the world. And then along comes the coronavirus. What happens? Well, exactly the same as the Paris Agreement. China uses the virus to ramp up their economy, shipping medical stuff and equipment, not all of which works, all around the world and so on. A plane arrived here only yesterday from Wuhan, of all places, while we are busy suppressing and smothering our fragile economy. Sorry, we're hibernating it. So, small businesses go under, unemployment spirals out of control, and as our economy goes to sleep for the winter, the value of our assets, strength of our workforce, productivity, they all go to sleep too. And there's good old China, the Chinese Communist government, ready to gobble up our most vulnerable assets faster than you can say, make mine a bowl of live baby bat soup in a Wuhan wet market. Thank you. We may as well just pick up the phone and say, "G'day, Z. Listen, mate, we're bored with all these wide open spaces and sunny beaches and dairy farms and beautiful countryside and harbours and mines and orchards and all that, so you may as well just come and snaffle up the lot, mate. Yeah, I mean, we're too busy hiding under the doona watching Netflix for the next 6 months. Thanks, mate. Bye." When this is all over, of course, we must start rebuilding our manufacturing industries. But will we be able to? Will the left let us? Not as things stand. Because even if we do manage to reboot our economy and quickly snap back, as the Prime Minister is fond of saying, what hope do we seriously have while we carry on being hamstrung by, for example, the Paris Agreement, or the anti-energy, stop Adani craziness of the climate cult, with our productivity, our inventiveness being sapped by subsidies for renewables, unaffordable energy, and with small businesses and individual incentive being garroted by the unions with their mad wages and award structures, penalty rates, green tape, red tape, you name it. The government has done a fantastic job stopping the exponential spread of the coronavirus. Thus far, touch wood. There isn't any. Yep, over there. But the PM was kidding himself and us when he said there were no longer unions and bosses. Nothing could be further from the truth. We desperately need more bosses. There aren't enough of them because we want more companies coming and setting up and bringing jobs back to our shores. Bosses create jobs, they employ people. But the Paris Agreement, the climate insanity, and the unions drive those jobs away. Now is the time to pull out of the Paris Agreement, slash bureaucracy, free up our employment laws, to encourage individuality and creativity, to encourage ambition and enterprise. Yes, the virus is a global nightmare, and yes, we were right to move as quickly and decisively as we did to stop its exponential spread. And yes, we must remain absolutely resolute and determined over Easter and the Anzac weekend to win this battle. But we must also, just as urgently, begin reopening the economy carefully and cleverly. We must maintain social distancing measures. Maybe it's masks in workplaces, testing. But it is not a choice between the virus and the economy. We must manage the virus, but we must also rebuild and strengthen our already ravaged economy. Let's walk and chew gum at the same time. We can do it. But only if we first get the left and their industrial relations, shackles and climate nonsense off our backs.